Hey everybody, what's going on? This is NJ FSD, and this is going to be my first look here, or first video that I'm going to be posting on my channel. And this channel is going to be all about Tesla's full self-driving software. I have used full self-driving for probably going on 2 years now. We originally got full self-driving when I owned a 2021 Model 3. At the time, that vehicle had enhanced autopilot when my wife and I bought it. And then, Tesla made full self-driving cheaper if you had enhanced autopilot at the time. So that made the purchase of full self-driving go from $8,000 to $2,000, which seemed more than acceptable at the time. And this was, I don't even know, one of the version 12s. So we had that car for a couple months before trading that vehicle in for a 2025 Model 3. At the time, Tesla was doing a transfer for free. You could transfer full self-driving. So that would make it a transfer from a hardware 3 car to a hardware 4 car, which seemed kind of like a no-brainer at no cost to us. So that's what we did. We got the 2025 Model 3. We owned that vehicle for just a few months, and then we upgraded to this current car, which is a 2026 Model Y. You can see here on the screen, a hardware 4 car with the front bumper cam. This is a long-range all-wheel drive Model Y, so I guess technically a premium. But I see a lot of videos for full self-driving all over the world, and I've definitely seen videos in New Jersey, but I haven't seen videos in New Jersey where I live, which kind of tends to be a little bit more foresty and maybe a little bit less populated than some other areas in New Jersey. We are central in the state, so not really near New York, but kind of not super close to Philadelphia as far as that's concerned. So I figured, what's another perspective? There are certainly things that we deal with our vehicle that I haven't seen some of the other content creators deal with. I know a couple versions ago, we definitely had a lot of problems with leaves. You can tell just by sitting in this parking lot, there's tons of trees and leaves everywhere. So that was kind of a headache for a little bit. That seems to be resolved now. So I am currently on full self-driving version 14.2.2. Have not yet gotten the 14.2.2.2 update, but hopefully that'll come through soon. But anyway, I just have a quick route that I wanted to drive through, a little under an hour, just to kind of show you guys what I would deal with in a day-to-day. I don't usually drive my vehicle that much, so it's not like I'm doing it every day, but kind of when my wife and I do drive, these tend to be some of the more common areas we go. So I'll just start full self-driving right from the parking lot. First stop is going to be an Acme supermarket, just to kind of show, not that none of this hasn't been seen before, but just to kind of show how this software deals with parking lots and handling pedestrian traffic or other vehicle traffic. In my experience, it's handled it very well. At least, I would say since version 14 came out, parking lots have been relatively good as far as dealing with pedestrians and other traffic. For sure, one of the earlier versions of 14 tended to be pretty hesitant around pedestrians, and of course that extended into parking lots, but I feel like that's kind of been resolved for the most part. So shouldn't really be anything crazy that happens, hopefully. But yeah, we'll just go through this drive and just kind of talk about it. So I, personally feel very strongly about this software. I think it's an incredible tool. We're going around a trash can that's just sitting in the middle of the road. I feel pretty strongly about this software for a multitude of reasons. Originally, a little bit more about me. I really wanted a Tesla for many, many years, and it just seemed like it was never in my budget. But I just thought the technology, was far above anything else, at least for the price. And so it was kind of my dream to get into any model of a Tesla. So when we did end up buying the 2021 Model 3 back in, I guess, 2023, 2024, that was just kind of like a dream come true. It would be interesting to see how we kind of handle this biker, because we definitely have oncoming traffic, but the biker is going to slow us and the traffic behind me down if we don't make a decision to pass at some point. So I would like to see the software kind of go around them. Doesn't seem like it's really going to want to do that. But who knows? We'll be coming up on a right-hand turn here. It's just being very, very hesitant here. And obviously getting honked at immediately just because you're being cautious around people. It's obviously one of the joys of driving around other humans who have places to be or in a rush, do not care about, well, I don't want to say they don't care about safety, but they certainly care a little bit less than a machine does. So, it's just something that you kind of have to deal with this software. People get pretty frustrated pretty quickly, and that's, going back to what I was saying about feeling pretty strongly about the software. I think that it removes a lot of the emotions of driving and frustrations. There are certainly still frustrations, even with full self-driving, especially when it makes somewhat interesting decisions that you wouldn't necessarily agree with. But by and large, the experience is generally relatively relatively emotionless, we'll say. But that's just a prime example of machines versus humans there, that we got to see within the first few minutes of this video. But other than like the emotional side of things, I just think that this technology is really interesting. I think it's really useful for so many different types of people. Your daily commuters, your people who, commute an hour and a half one way, obviously takes a lot of the burden off of you in those circumstances. There we go. We just backed in, pretty flawless there. We're just going to continue on our route. Nothing really to say here. Coming in, maybe make some weird choices about which route it takes in the parking lot. Tends to hit a lot of the stop signs, but other than that, I mean, totally fine, totally passable. So we do have a car pulling out on our right, but doesn't seem like we're really going to interact with them. We should be getting out of here, no problem. So interestingly, the car is deciding to make a left. You could also make a right out of this parking lot, and I feel like it would kind of put you closer to the intersection that we need to get to, but it is deciding to make a left. You'll see here what I was saying with interesting route choices. So making a left to another stop sign. I feel like most humans here would probably just continue straight at this point, but FSD just wants to make a right and then an immediate left. That's pretty much how it always handles this parking lot. So I'm not going to say that that's unusual, but it's just something to note, interestingly, that it likes to always take that route out of here. Now, we don't have a stop sign here, but we do slowly creep up, make sure that there is no traffic coming from the left, and then hop on over to the right lane here. This could be a somewhat challenging left turn if you're making it. We're not making a left turn. We're going to be making a right because you do have cross traffic and it's unprotected, but we are good to go here. But I do think that the use case for full self-driving, covers so many demographics. Talking about, like I was saying, the daily commuters who just have long drives both ways and traffic that they have to contend with. That's for sure a use case. Obviously, for people who do road trips, I love going on road trips. with this vehicle. I think that it is a much better experience. There's something about plugging in your destination and just hitting the button and letting it go, especially now with where we're at with version 14, where you even have, you know, pulling in and out of parking spots and parking at chargers. Just over the Thanksgiving holiday last month, you know, my wife and I used it to go to Pennsylvania. That was about a 4.5 hour drive, and I would say FSD handled, you know, 98% of the driving. I really, the only issues that we had, it was waiting a little while to get over into this left lane. That's a right-hand turn only lane on the right side. But the only issues that I found, interestingly, and I don't know if it's still an issue, but you know, as we were hitting superchargers to charge back up, I found that anytime we would leave, there would be like indeterminable amount of time where after we would leave the chargers, our vehicle would throw up, you know, the red steering wheel, take over immediately. Some of those occasions were merging onto a highway. Some of those were going through tolls, just different scenarios. Now, saying merging onto a highway, it wasn't like we were going 70 miles an hour. Usually it was a pretty sharp turn, like on-ramp onto the highway, so we were maybe at 30, you know, getting ready to accelerate to highway speeds, but, you know, the vehicle would throw up the red steering wheel, and obviously that's not ideal. I haven't seen that happen. I mean, that would have been, I'm thinking that was version 14.17. So since we've been on 14.2, I don't know that has happened again, but, you know, I may be wrong with my timeline and my versions. There's just been so many versions pushed out recently, so I wouldn't be surprised if I was incorrect there. But those were the only real circumstances I could think of that I needed to take over. Other than that, it was, you know, handling A to B to C to D. I will say, you know, there's a lot of talk about the profiles, you know, so you have your sloth, your chill, your standard, hurry, and Mad Max. Actually, right now I was on hurry. I'm kind of flying 10 miles over the speed limit here. Don't think that's the best speed to be going on this road. There's really no traffic in front of or behind me, so kind of standing out there. But I will say, like, the speed profiles on that trip kind of left somewhat to be desired. I'm not sure what this vehicle is doing. If they're making a right-hand turn, I have no clue what is happening here. But FSD is, we should be making right. For some reason, this person made the shoulder their own lane, and now they're just kind of driving in the middle of the road. Wow, I did not anticipate these kinds of interactions. We do have a pedestrian crossing here. This is, I have no clue what's happening here, but sure, we went around that. Just heading up to a park that's just over here on the right by this fire station. The speed profiles definitely were leaving somewhat to be desired, I will say. This does say private parking, or private property, no parking, so we're just going to go ahead and leave out of here. I'm not entirely sure why this would be private parking. It is a public park, but hey. So we'll just go ahead, re-engage, and head on over to our next destination here. Not sure where you would park to use that. It's like a dog park. I'm not sure where you're supposed to park then, but all right, we'll just continue on. On that road trip, I would say, yeah, the speed profiles were kind of difficult to work around. Sometimes you would find that standard wasn't giving you enough speed, hurry was too much speed, you know, and then back at that version, it really seemed like the speeds were pretty hard capped, you know, where standard would go like 5 over, which on a highway, when you're trying to keep up with the flow of traffic, if your vehicle's limited to only 5 miles an hour over the speed limit on standard, but then can go up to 10 on hurry, you kind of get in these weird situations where if the vehicle's not staying with the flow, you're either going way too fast or you're going way too slow for the traffic around you. We do have a red stop. We are creeping, but there is a vehicle on the left. It looks like they are going to be getting a red light. Yep, we got the green, so we'll just proceed through there. I will say, you know, since that version, really haven't had any major road trips or anything like that. So I can't really comment on how speed profiles kind of handle on longer trips, but it seems like it's at a decent spot. I know there's quite a lot of people who are really hoping that they bring back like a speed limit or a max speed limit, which I can understand. There are certainly issues or circumstances where you don't want to be going super fast. Just to point out, this road is a 50. We are going 47 on standard. That's kind of unacceptable on this road. I would say most people kind of at least get to 55, if not 60. I don't know if you can really make it out. We do have leaves going back and forth on the road here, so I'm not sure if that's kind of leading to the car's hesitancy with its speed, but I did bump it up to hurry. We're sitting pretty much on 50 on the dot on hurry, which is interesting because this is pretty clear conditions other than those leaves. So I'm going to bump it up to Mad Max. We'll see if we get any sort of increase in speed here. I do have a vehicle behind me who's probably wondering why we're only going 50 miles an hour on this road. Again, I feel like a lot of people probably get closer to at least 55. But even on Mad Max, it seems like we're not really committing to going too fast, although as I say that, the speed starts creeping up a little bit. The windshield, I'm sure you can make out, is pretty dirty. If you can't, I'm here to tell you it is pretty dirty. Interesting that the vehicle has not decided to do one of those robo-taxi wipes to clean the camera. I guess visibility's fine as far as it's concerned. Of course, from my perspective in the driver's seat, my section of glass is pretty clear, but I can definitely tell on the passenger side it's kind of covered in a salty residue. It's just par for the course here in New Jersey in the winter, where we salt the roads all the time whenever it snows. And then you get hit with rain, so it just mixes to make a really nasty mixture. Mad Max finally has us up to 55 on a 50. I would honestly expect to see it go much faster than this, so it is interesting that we're kind of staying where I think standard would usually be. I would bump it back down to hurry to just see. Let's see if it has any sort of interaction with the speed limit. Doesn't look like it. Not really slowing down. I don't want to go too low on the profile because, like I said, we do have a vehicle behind us. Does look like, you know, some of the early access, and it seems like as of today, maybe even people outside of early access are starting to get 14.2.2.2. I did, you know, I watched most of the big creators in this space, including Dirty Tesla, Canada FSD, Chuck Cook, and the list kind of goes on and on, but, you know, it does seem like, for the most part, it seems like a pretty good version. I did notice in Canada FSD's video, he did have kind of an issue where the vehicle is backing into a spot, but it did not disengage its full self-driving. It sat there for a little bit. Okay, so we are clear from the left, we are clear from the right. We are waiting for that car to commit to a left or to a right turn, and we'll proceed. So this road is 55 miles an hour. Again, most people I would say pretty common for them to be going at least 60, if not, closer to 65. We're still on the hurry profile, so we'll see where this car wants to kind of camp out at. So one, like 2-lane road, but 1 lane each direction, pretty much this whole stretch of road. You tend to have a lot of people, because it is, for the most part, a dashed yellow, you tend to have a lot of people overtake on this road. It is a pretty, we'll say, infamous road for head-on collisions, especially when, at night, people, it's very difficult to judge distances and people try to overtake. There's literally no lights on this road, on the sides of the road, so it can be really difficult to even see. And then you factor in left and right of us is nothing but really woods. You also have a lot of wildlife, deer. So it could be a pretty dangerous road to take if you're driving fairly aggressively, but a lot of people do it. So we're still on hurry, camping out 5 miles above the speed limit. I'll push us up to Mad Max and see if we can't get a little bit more out of this. The vehicle behind me is kind of right behind me. Wouldn't be surprised if they try to overtake, because again, going 5 over the speed limit, but that is just not enough for some people. And this is just really interesting because I'm not entirely sure why the vehicle is choosing to only stay 5 above the speed limit. Conditions are clear. There's no adverse weather. There's really nothing on the road, and it's just interesting to see that we seem to be pretty stuck at 5 over, which, again, for this road, for most people, probably too slow. We'll likely end up getting, a line of cars behind us. And people might be getting a little frustrated at the fact that we're not, there we go, we finally hit 6 over as we go downhill. It's just interesting. I do find that full self-driving tends to be a little bit more cautious with elevation and hills. So before we went to 7 over, we were, approaching and driving up an incline. So maybe that was part of the reason why full self-driving didn't want to commit to going much more than 5 over. But, and I do find that from time to time, making turns, blind corners, elevation, it tends to kind of lower its limit a little bit. But here, we have open road, again on Mad Max, and we're sticking pretty much at 7 over, which you watch other creators and you watch other people who use Mad Max and the thing's going 15, 20 miles an hour, or 20 miles an hour over the speed limit. Not sure what's different about here, but again, that's part of why I wanted to make this channel. I think it's, everyone's location, everyone's geography is a little bit different. This looks nothing like North Jersey and its densely packed cities, highways everywhere, and lots of traffic. This is Central Jersey, the middle of the Pine Barrens, where things tend to be a little bit different. So it is always interesting to see. We also don't know if you can really pick it up on the camera and the video, but we do have quite a bit of wind we're contending with. The vehicle is kind of doing a little bit of a ping pong back and forth. Speed limit does drop to 50 here. Now we're at 63, dropping it to hurry, no reaction, dropping it to standard, an immediate reaction, I'm assuming down to 5 over. So it's very interesting, talking about the speed profiles, very interesting why some profiles choose to disregard, some stick to the hard limits. And I think that's a lot of the frustration people have with the profiles, is that predictability is sometimes missing. And for people who, use the software every day and are fans of the software, maybe not as big of a deal. It's always interesting to see what choices the vehicle decides to make, so long as they're safe. But for people who don't experience it or don't have access to it, that unpredictability is certainly a detracting factor to what I assume to be a detracting factor to people adopting the technology. And it's expensive. Obviously, you can subscribe, but for a lot of people, $100 a month is not insignificant. So you ask yourself, if you don't have full self-driving, and you see that there are these instances of unpredictability, is it worth giving up $100 a month for something that's just I would say it's very close to being there if there is unsupervised, but it's not 100%. And I think maybe some people hesitate because of that, and to buy it too. I mean, I would, for people who are unsure of the software, to suggest paying $8,000 for a piece of technology that maybe isn't even there yet, it's probably a much more difficult pill to swallow than $100 a month. But I do think that is part of the issue that people have with the speed profiles as they are right now. Maybe that was adjusted in 14.2.2. Don't know how many point twos there are, but at least where I'm at on 14.2.2, you could see that we were running into some issues there. Nothing that affected the safety. Nothing. It was technically choosing to drive over the speed limit anyway, but I think what people are looking for is a little bit more freedom in that speed control, and I just wanted to showcase that in that scenario, for some reason, we were pretty hard capped at our speed. Our next destination, we're about 9 minutes out, is going to be a Lowe's. Yet again, another parking lot to interact with. Not sure how busy it'll be. This is Tuesday at 10 o'clock. Still off for the holidays, so I wouldn't usually be making this drive throughout the week, but this tends to be a little bit more of a older community, so there may be a lot more people shopping at this time. We'll say I don't know if it's unfortunate, but one of the factors of living in Central Jersey like I do is that we're not super close to a lot of shopping centers, places where there's lots of traffic, and we can't really get onto a highway in 5, 10, 15 minutes. We kind of have to drive a little bit before we get to highways. Would obviously love to have a bit more highway driving, because this one or 2-lane road with traffic in both directions, I feel like FSD has kind of handled these scenarios well for a pretty long time. I really can't think of, in recent memory, I really can't think of a time where driving on a road like this has been a negative experience, aside from, like I mentioned before, when leaves were like a big problem. you'd have leaves, like there was just one, probably didn't see it, but there leaves flying across. And man, was that an unpleasant experience, to say the least. Several instances where the vehicle would, hard stop or emergency brake. Never when, I don't want to say interestingly, but interestingly, never when there were vehicles right behind us, which could have put us in a safety, critical situation. But still, going, 50 to 55 miles an hour, and then harshly braking for a pile of leaves, is still a jarring experience. But that has not been the case for a little bit. Again, this is kind of old news, but I did find that whenever there was a lead car in those situations that kind of drove over the leaves without braking or anything, that the car would follow and choose not to brake. But yeah, whenever there was a lead car missing, it was definitely scared of those leaves. But it's not been an issue for a little bit, so love to see that. Love to see the continual updates and progressions. For those of us, like I have purchased FSD, for those of us who have bought into the system and are just in the system, we're not subscribing, we can't necessarily just choose to not participate in. I mean, we can, obviously we can choose not to engage, but we own it, we own the software, so. Okay, handling, this is a pretty large roundabout. Again, never really an issue. I do think that signals should be used in these circumstances, but you'll see here, none. These two trucks in front of us, no signals to leave the traffic circle. So I guess an argument could be made that we may be confusing the people behind us, but there was a brief hesitation there. I'm not sure what the vehicle saw. I don't know that the speed even changed, but I could hear the brakes kind of pumping a little bit, continuing through. Not sure if it was leaves or what. Hopefully not after just talking about that, but just thought I'd point that out. In this area, the traffic will kind of pick up a little bit more. It does get a little bit busier as we head closer towards the east coast of Jersey, closer to the shore. Not really the season for it, but there's certainly more traffic here than where we started. Up ahead is always an interesting circumstance for the vehicle to navigate through. So the road that we are on is going to split into two lanes on our side. We are going to be taking a roundabout up ahead that we kind of need to travel through. So it's best that we stick into the left lane. In previous versions, there would be instances where the vehicle would try to get over to the right, pass people, and then you kind of have to take over to push it back into the left lane. Even humans do that kind of stuff, where you can see that one lane is shorter than the other. Well, I'm just going to hop into that lane. Like, we have this vehicle on the right. They were just behind us right now. Our vehicle wants to make a right to get around this truck, which, so long as it can get around the truck and get back over into the left lane, totally fine. But as of right now, it's not really giving enough to get around the truck. So we'll see if we can get ahead of them and get back over to the left lane, or if okay, signaling for the left lane here, which is what you need to do. This confuses people often. It's one lane, but a lot of people will stage as if there's two lanes, like one to continue through the traffic circle, one to go right. But It really is just one lane, so wasn't an issue there. Yielded perfectly fine. There's no traffic and continued. Lowe's is just going to be coming up ahead on the left here. So we'll see how busy the parking lot is and what route it decides to take. It looks like it's going to take a pretty interesting route through the parking lot and probably hit the most amount of pedestrian, like interactions with pedestrians and other traffic. But, I'm not driving. It'd be interesting to see what it chooses to do. Just have to wait our turn here. The oncoming traffic should be going after this truck. Handled that fine. This intersection tends to confuse people when you come in because there are stop signs on the left and right. A lot of people do not stop. We have the right of way continuing through, but I have seen accidents in that intersection before. Good tree branch there in the road. Miss it just fine. So it does have its left signal on. So I'm guessing, okay, I'll take this, immediately make a right. Obviously the entrance of Lowe's is pretty much dead ahead, so we'll see how close the vehicle wants to get before parking. Looks like we'll be making a right-hand turn here, hopefully avoiding the handicap spots, which are always at the front. Now there are these curbside pickup spots. I'm not sure if it's going to choose to park in those. We do have a pedestrian on the right. Not sure if we'll get an interaction with them. Looks like we will not. He chose to go behind us. Okay, it was going to try and park in a cart spot. I chose to proceed here, where there is a bit of a curb. Okay, so we'll see just how close we got. Yeah, that's fine. Kind of had to be a little bit closer to the left-hand side of the parking spot because of that curb. But, handled fine. A little weird with the pedestrian. You could have just waited. It seemed like the pedestrian was confused that we parked where we did, so close to the crosswalk, because they probably wanted to proceed in front of us, but then they saw our vehicle start creeping, so then he had to come behind us to pass us. So that's Lowe's. Next spot we're going to be going is back to our starting point, so that'll be probably close to a 30-minute drive. Yeah, see, I personally would, interesting. Oh, you know what? It still has Lowe's set as its location. That's fine. We'll get a double park here. That's weird. We'll just take that out and then head on over to the park. Let's see how long. 28 minutes, yep. All right, now we should head out of here. I would personally try and go to the right as we get out of here, instead of dealing with all the pedestrians towards the left, and it looks like that's what we'll be doing. Backing out of here with plenty of space, and we'll continue on our route back to our starting point. It could make a left here. That is another way to get out. But it is choosing to stop and make a right. Nothing wrong with that, just figure I'd point it out. And we'll probably make an immediate left here with oncoming traffic. They seem to be letting us go. I did not press the pedal, so they let us go and the vehicle decided to proceed. Pretty cool. Pretty much decided to proceed exactly when they started to wave us on, so always feels good when the vehicle reacts appropriately. Obviously older versions wasn't the case. It sit there awkwardly and lead to some confusion, I'm sure. But in that circumstance, it handled it perfectly fine. So heading out of here, we are going to have to renegotiate the traffic circle, but we should just be continuing straight through. We don't have any yields or anything like that. The traffic that is in the circle does have to yield to us. It appears that our vehicle is choosing to yield, so I am going to give it an accelerator press, because that is not the right way to do it. So one sort of intervention, if you want to call it that. There was traffic behind us, so was not ideal to have us slow down and nearly brake for traffic coming out of the traffic circle. This road will kind of merge back into one lane, so again, we'll have to negotiate with the lane to our left and other traffic to get back into the single lane and continue down back towards our destination. Interestingly, choosing not to creep forward here, as that person in front of us did. It's kind of like the, I would say the more human thing to do is to kind of creep up if space is given. Not saying it's right or wrong. I guess the argument can be made it is wrong, because obviously if you get rear-ended, and you hit the car in front of you, you're in trouble, or you're liable. So, all right, we got over. The Chevy in front of us, pushed ahead of us, so there wasn't much opportunity for us to really negotiate with other traffic. Coming back to this roundabout, second roundabout here. Again, we'll obviously signal. Cars to our left should be yielding, which they do. The vehicle this time did not have any issues with braking, so that's operating as intended there. I'm sure we'll signal to go ahead and take the exit. Back on the road where right now the vehicle says it's 45 miles an hour, the speed limit. It is not, I believe. Here it's either 50 or 55. So it's probably going to camp out at 50 miles an hour. We're still on standard. It's probably going to be a minute before we hit a speed limit sign. For the car to update its speed limit here. 50 may be the speed limit, and in which case we're driving it. There you go. There's a speed limit up ahead. So it is 55, not 50. So we are not driving the speed limit currently in standard. Of course, we just passed that threshold. Kind of very slowly choosing to get to that speed limit here. We are kind of holding up traffic at this point, so I am going to bump it up to hurry, see if we get any more of a reaction here. Again, very interesting. I'm not sure why the car is being so timid with its speed. Roads are clear. No adverse conditions here. Even on hurry, we're just now hitting the speed limit and kind of barely creeping over it, drop us back into standard, and we'll see what the vehicle decides to do. Okay, so it's going to continue to probably creep up to, I would say, like 60. If we even hit 60. Looks like we're kind of hanging out here at 58. Very windy, not sure if the camera or the microphone picks it up, but definitely getting pushed back and forth in the car. Not sure if that has anything to do with its speed decision, but just something to point out. Really choosing not to get up to 60 here. You know, I would say that this is kind of where chill tends to sit with the speed limit, so it is interesting that we're sitting on standard and not really hitting that 5 over that you usually see. You can see, hopefully you can make it out, like the steering wheel really competing with the wind pushing us back and forth here. So now we're just getting up to 60, 61, still on standard. Not sure what, told the car that it can choose to go a little bit faster now, but that is what it's doing. Really getting pushed back and forth with the wind here. Another Model Y. I think that's it's a standard, right? Because it doesn't have the full brake light. I'm not 100% sure. Choosing to follow the car that decided to pass that. Technically not the proper or legal thing to do is to pass on the shoulder, but I would say nearly everyone does it here. Speed limit 55 miles an hour, still in standard. Choosing to go 54, 55 up this hill. Wondering again if my theory will have any sort of credence to it as we get over this hill. I wonder if it'll push any further here. There you go. To 56. Interesting as I think about this drive, with the one intervention, like entering into that roundabout. Those are the kind of things, right, that the general public, that people who do not have FSD, even people who do have FSD, those are the kinds of things that will make people hesitant to adopt the technology and the software, because I could almost guarantee if I had been driving with a family member or someone who isn't used to the software and we approached that roundabout and the vehicle decided to slow down and potentially even stop where it shouldn't have, those are the kinds of things that people will remember. We tend to, remember and focus the negatives with these kinds of things, so myself included. But, we could have been driving 30 minutes prior to that, and we pretty much did, with someone else, and, they could have been really impressed and comfortable with the software, and then on the way back, the vehicle decides that it wants to slow down inappropriately. And, I would wager that person walking away from that experience they would probably admit that it was an overall impressive experience, but, there will always be a but. There was that one issue, and that's the thing that not only will they remember the software by, but, even more so, that may be the thing that they kind of spread to other people they know, if it ever came up in conversation, or it is in conversation and that person's present, or you're talking about the capabilities of the software, and that person will choose to kind of join in the conversation and say, well, it was interesting, but remember it did this, and those kinds of interactions, I think, are important. It's important to address and point out the limitations. But those, when you point out those limitations, that tends to be what anyone focuses on. It's just very interesting how that works, right? You could have a 98% flawless drive, but that 1 or 2%, where the vehicle decided to make a weird decision, that informs the rest of the experience. And I think that's part of, some of the adoption issues that the vehicle, or that full self-driving has, is instances like that. And it's just interesting that that is how the perception, kind of grows, negatively or positively. I would argue that 98% flawless is far more impressive and far more worth talking about than the 2% weird braking, inappropriate braking. You still need to talk about both, undoubtedly. But as someone who experiences the software all the time and who believes in it and uses it as much as I can, I'm not going to, go home, park my car, and go, well, it started to slow down before that roundabout, so it's not worth using. But for people who rarely use it, or that was their only experience, that is the moment that they will most likely walk away from. And I don't want to discredit that, because I think at the same time those people would admit it is impressive, but you need it to be impressive, you need it to be safe, you need it to be user-friendly, you need it to be a lot of things for it to really take hold. And so if people walk away with, it was pretty impressive, but there was those issues, and for them, those issues outweigh, the rest of the experience, that is part of the problem. That's part of the issue with, trying to show this software to people or try. It's interesting to me, in my own personal experiences. It's interesting the amount of people in my life, my wife's life, who know that we have this vehicle, who know that there's this weird idea floating around that there is like full self-driving, but they never like understand what that means. It comes up often at parties or in groups where it's more so spoken about kind of like a gimmick, where it's kind of like, drive safe. Oh wait, you're not gonna be the one. Or I always say it, honestly. I'm always like, I'm not gonna be driving. But the response to that is generally kind of like a laugh, or like a, like, not a laugh in understanding, but a laugh in like, okay, like whatever that means, sure. But not realizing that I truly mean, yeah, I will not be driving. We will leave. I will have the destination plugged in. I'll hit a button and it'll take us home. We got lots of leaves here. Interesting to see. If it reacts to any of these, no, doesn't seem like it's reacting, but plenty of leaves blowing back and forth here. So I think that is, part of the issue with its perception is people don't understand. And even, I've had people in my vehicle, like my mother, and I'll have FSD on in the snow and stuff, and she's still like shocked or just surprised by what it does or how it does it. And yet, in conversations and stuff, it's never really like, I don't know what the right word is, validated. So it's almost like a lot of people, like I said, kind of view the software as a gimmick and not nearly at the level that it does operate at. And I think part of it is getting people to experience it, for sure. But going back to the roundabout conversation, if you get those people to try to experience it, and their experience is it slowed down weirdly for a roundabout, that's what they're going to walk away with it from. I'd be interested to see if we're going to pull over here, because there is the work truck with blinking lights. It has done that in the past. Okay, no reaction, so good. I have had that happen quite a few times with work vehicles with amber lights on, where the car will think it's an emergency vehicle and decide it wants to pull over, but wasn't an issue there. So we'll continue on. And it's also, it's kind of a weird, if you think about it, it's kind of a weird and not intuitive sell for people. I've done it where, the car and will come up in conversation, and I'll bring up that it can drive itself, and, people are like, like not truly understanding what I'm saying. And I have offered to take them, but that's like if you think about it, it's kind of a weird proposition. It's not something that people do, right? You don't, yes, if someone gets a new car or something, yeah, maybe you'll hop in with them and go for a drive, but it's not usually something where you show up to a party and you're like, hey, who wants to take a drive in my vehicle? It'll drive itself. That's not really how you sell it. So then what is the best way to do it? What is the way that makes it seem least like a gimmick? Because I can tell you, I have used the software in the past to transport people, to bring people, if we're carpooling, whatever, going to eat, going out to dinner or something, or whatever, and it'll be fully self-driven. And like, I just don't think that it really computes or people can acknowledge like what is happening. I still have people who get in the car if I'm going to take them somewhere, and they ask me like, are you driving? And it's like, no, like, have you seen me, touch the wheel at all? It's like, oh, But is that a testament to software that they're not even, they can't even tell if I'm driving or not? I don't know, but there needs to be a somewhat more organic way to do it, because I think, and I might be interested in taking family members or whoever would be willing to go for drives with me to do these videos, of course, but that's almost like a forced or like a staged experience where it's like, just so you know, I'm going to be letting the car self-drive. We're going for a drive, but I'm not going to drive, just so you know. Like, you have to kind of preface it, and that to me almost seems like you're just trying to show it off, which I guess in a sense you are, but it's more than just trying to show it off. You're really trying to introduce people to it the best way, which is, butts and seats, let's go for a drive. Let's go for a drive together, and you see it and experience it for yourself. And of course, internally, I don't know that many creators would say this, but internally you're kind of like hoping and praying that nothing crazy happens, right? Because like I was saying, something crazy happens, that's going to be what people walk away with. But it's a very interesting, challenge isn't the right word, but it's an interesting thing for us to try to work around. So we are just a couple minutes away from the final destination here, so hopefully you guys enjoyed. You skipped around, I don't blame you. I watch these videos all the time and I still skip around. I get it, there's a lot of dead space of just driving in a straight line, but moving forward as updates continue to come out and new capabilities are added, even though I'm not in the early access program as of yet, I still want to use the software and show the software as best I can. So I do hope, we had a little bit of a brake stab there, or a brake for the leaves, and now we're driving over some just fine. But I do hope that you guys enjoyed. I hope that some of you find this slightly different, there's the trash can from before, slightly different side of New Jersey. I hope you find it interesting. And you know, eventually we'll try to do, or aim to do, you know, drives in areas that are a little bit more common for the state. This is interesting. So we have pedestrian on the left, work truck blocking us ahead. I don't think we're going to make this maneuver here because of the pedestrian. Is choosing to very cautiously go around them. A lot of hesitation there. It really did not know what it wanted to do there. But yeah, as we get to the park, looks like there's a van here. As we get to the park, and hopefully the car parks itself, I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in, for watching. If you stuck around to the end, I really appreciate it. We'll be, I guess, seeing you on the next one, whenever that is. Not sure if we're going to nose in or back in. I'll probably just nose in with the van there, yep. But, yeah, guys, I appreciate you sticking with me, and I'll see you next time.